So welcome everybody to another of the Athlete Mindset discussions. And this week we're going to be talking about mobilizing teams. So in sport, it's a given that high performance is expected, but we often see in business, we're aiming for similar highs, but actually getting a group of individuals to perform at very high levels can be really, really challenging. I've seen many projects kick off where when we first bring individuals together, we talk about project plans and roles and responsibilities and budgets, and then wonder why people aren't inspired to really work well together. We also know there's lots of research out there. John Katzenbach, for example, talks about that hockey stick shape, where actually research has shown for decades now that you could bring together a group of really high performing individuals, really talented, experienced, intelligent people, who you put them in a room together and they just massively underperform. In fact, in many cases, you'd be better off leaving people on their own. So in this episode, we're going to look to see what we can learn from the world of sport, because high performance in sport is a given. But we're going to be exploring what are some of the things that we can take from sport in the way that they build high performance. So Mike, let's come to you first. I mean, as a coach, what are some of the things that you focus on to accelerate your team to much higher levels of performance?
Thanks, Dean. When I was coaching the national development program with the Canadians, I knew that impressive teams were made up of impressive individuals, and that whole mentality creates an environment where each individual can rely on their teammates, and they can do that based on relationships that are built on a foundation of trust. And to accelerate the program of getting to sort of a trusting team, you have to move through the stages of team development. Forming, you're going to get the athletes getting to know each other, the colleagues, the business team members getting to know each other. And there's an inevitable stage of storming where challenges are abundant and you get people butting heads. And we would simulate competitions on the ski hill in order to like create that environment where there's a lot of stress, so that testing the athletes was the mechanism that resulted in the team building. So you could move through that stage a little bit quicker, rather than having to do it when the pressure was on and there was actually a podium or a paycheck on the line. So creating not necessarily an arbitrary deadline, but something that isn't high stakes in terms of the business's overall performance, but something where you are going to challenge your team members and push them to that sort of brink where they are really having to get to know each other, so that they can push through and start realizing where their strengths are. And how you evaluate those people as a leader could also give you insight on how you're going to act and steer the ship when you are faced with a real world challenge that might have significant consequences for the business. But getting people through that stage quickly so that they can get to a high performance environment. I mean, it happens if you can build trust in a sort of condensed timeline.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a really nice example, isn't it? Sort of pushing the team to those limits. I imagine also that the evaluation of those exercises, those mini competitions, are going to be critical to draw the real learning from that and make those connections much stronger.
Yeah, you learn as much in that process as a leader and about the team dynamic as you can in a real world. And it's much better to learn from something that you've created, whether the team knows it or not necessarily. You've set just this strict deadline or something where you are pushing them to really test their skills. That's going to be a much safer way for you to learn as a leader that you can than if you have to learn the hard and sometimes costly way. So yeah, it's a really positive exercise.
Great, thank you. And coming to you, Stuart, I mean, rowing has such an incredible history of success. What are some of the lessons that you've taken from how you accelerate teams to high performance?
Yeah, I think the thing that goes without saying in Olympic sport is that we all share a sense of purpose. And with that removed, I think those teams would be really rudderless. We wouldn't know how to bring ourselves together and how to form up. But I think as we dig a bit deeper into that purpose, it breaks down in each day in that trust that we've talked about and how you build the team. I think when you enter a new team, as I did in 2015, it can be a really scary environment. But if you're able to remove that fear of failure, then you can create that purpose and trust and layer them on top of each other. And so for me, that came about in our high altitude training camp in Sierra Nevada. I sat down on the ergo and could not have failed any harder. I think it was one of the worst physical tests of my entire life, and I couldn't see for the second half of it. I was in just a world of pain, and I fell off the ergo at the end. And at the end of the camp, in the roundup, the head coach said, congratulations, you failed. And it was almost this joke, but it really made me realize that we were encouraged to fail. We were at times encouraged to go out, try something different and fail, and that was fine because it was in pursuit of this purpose. We had to learn where the red line was. And I think not only did that show me what the team was about, it showed the whole group of us that had come in at that point, how this team functioned and how we could move forward with this shared purpose and with the trust that existed within the team.
It's a really great example, Stuart. And you've sort of drawn out two things there, really, isn't there? There's purpose, and we're talking more than mission statements and just lines on a piece of paper here. True purpose that connects you emotionally. But I would imagine that must have done a huge amount in terms of the trust that didn't, not just for you joining that team, but the message that sends to the whole team around how important trust is, that failure is okay.
Yeah, I think there's a real danger, particularly when people get used to being in a team, that you can't fail. And the closer you get to this big performance, failure becomes less and less acceptable. But to remind people that it's okay, that you have to find the red line is really important. And I think throughout the season of rowing, there's always a race that you completely bomb. And it's about finding the red line, and you have to be right on it to perform. But accepting that those failures will come and that they're a part of growth and a part of that success is incredibly important.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And coming to you, Tom, I mean, in the world of rugby, you must have seen been involved in some really interesting mobilizations at the start of the season, new players coming in and out all the time. I mean, what are some of your lessons around how you accelerate teams through that initial phase?
Yeah, certainly the first day of pre-season training was the first day of hell, I think, is probably the way I'd best describe it. Probably Stu's experience on the ergo is pretty much the rugby equivalent to what I would have experienced on that first day. And it's about a united front. It's about providing an opportunity for people to work towards something from day dot. Now, you've got to be really careful, because on the one hand, if you create an environment that is short-term based, that you want short-term results only, and that's all you care about, then you can unite people in whichever way you want. But actually there comes a point, and football managers are a great example of that, when they quickly change football managers because they want a quick result. And you get that great blip in results because everyone wants to impress the manager. But then things start to level out, and people start to see through the rhetoric which is coming through from the leader. And actually, without some form of long-term plan in your rhetoric, in your planning, so that your purpose, as Stu touched on it, it requires an active contribution from everyone in the whole organization, not just that one individual who's the superstar maverick of everyone, but actually all the way down to the person who jumps in for that superstar maverick when he's injured. So without that active contribution that's required from everyone, and the persistence required to reach a long-term goal, so don't just assume that you're going to be planning for being the best next week. Plan to be the best forever. That is a goal that is going to be constantly driving you and driving every single behavior from within what you're doing. And then it's up to you as a leader to provide the intensity of the organization in which to do that, so that that first day of training sets the tone, but then it's continued throughout.
I love that. A bit that's really resonated with me is how day one sets the tone. And I think a lot of organizations fail to understand the impact of the culture you create on day one of mobilization. So core messages coming out of how do you accelerate that mobilization phase of teams? Really clear, strong, powerful and emotional purpose. Not just a standard mission statement of we want to be number one, but something that engages your team at that emotional level. Connection, how you're building connection across the team, so that through that connection there's trust. Trust paves the way for feedback, open discussion, open debate, criticism, conflict. And that's a theme that we're seeing in all of these. This has been the athlete mindset, developed by athletes, designed for business.